One. Hello and welcome to the Valley Sports Telegram playoffs bracket breakdown. We are going to do the girls' divisions tonight, and we're going to go through them 1 through 5, break down the matchups. How do the Valley teams look? How many of them can make a run? Which ones are we worried about? And overall, kind of get a sense of what it's probably going to look like in 2 weeks when we're looking at going into the semifinals and the finals. Joining me today, as always, is Kenny Hodges. And with him today, we have Eric Owens jumping on for the first time. And we're going to roll right into this. We'll start with the open division. It's pretty packed as far as the Valley goes. We've got 4 of the 8 spots. Up on top, Granada Hills is number 1. They're facing San Fernando. King Drew is facing Birmingham. They'll be hosting. Taft is traveling to Westchester. And Crenshaw is hosting Palisades. Those games will be on February 9th. A couple thoughts before I kick it over to you guys. Birmingham and Taft were kind of neck and neck throughout most of the season. That breakdown really came to how they played Granada. It looks like they split their games against each other. And then that 1 versus 8 is really one that stands out to me because Granada Hills, we know, has been a buzzsaw. But San Fernando played their way into open. 24-3, 12-0 in league. The questions we have as a staff, and I know Kenny will go deeper into it, is did San Fernando schedule enough competition, challenging competition, to have earned this spot, to be higher? Are they ready for Granada Hills? These are some questions that are going to be answered in a few days. But I'm going to kick it over to Kenny to get it started, and let's go.
Yeah, so for me, looking at this open division bracket, I outside of San Fernando, I don't really have too many complaints about the teams who actually slotted here. Birmingham maybe could have been a top 4 seed, but the way they kind of finished the season in terms of those losses to Granada Hills may have knocked them out of being able to host a home playoff game. Had they at least split the season series, they for sure would have ended up a top 4 seed and open. And then you look at a team like Taft. Taft, to me, might be the wild card here in this bracket, just because the addition of Aliyah Muhammad to the starting lineup in the second half of the year really sort of transformed that team and gave them the balance that made them such a dangerous opponent to go up against. Now they can beat you on the inside. We know what they can do with players like Evelyn Burrell, who has been a dog for them for the last couple of years. They have a 6'3" center who can kind of dominate in the paint. And then you add this girl, Aliyah Muhammad, the sophomore on the perimeter, who is as shifty as they come, as fast and as and explosive as any guard that you're going to find in the city section. And they could end up being a team that could definitely give Westchester a run for their money in this first game, and maybe possibly make a run towards an open championship. So it's definitely going to be competitive. We definitely have 4 really good matchups. There are 4 or 5 teams in this open that if any of them won the championship, you really wouldn't be shocked. So it's going to be fun to see.
That open does have some enticing matchups that could potentially happen that are just kind of sitting there waiting to see if it's going to work. Again, the idea that we could have a third Birmingham and Granada matchup in the second round, in the semis of open leading into the final, that is pretty enticing. If Birmingham can get past King Drew, they'll be licking their chops, wanting another match. So we'll roll right into D1. Hamilton's the 1 seed. They got a bye. Arleta is the number 8 seed, and we're going from the top of the bracket down. They're hosting Narbonne, the number 9. Arleta went 13-5, 15 overall, 8-4 in league. That got them one home game. Next, Poly is the other team with a bye. They were the number 4 seed. The play-in for them is Garfield and Venice. The winner will face Poly. Eagle Rock got the number 2 seed, and we were talking about this off air. This was a little intriguing based on how the season ended, where Poly might have felt they got gypped in their seeding. But in the play-in there, Verdugo Hills is hosting Cleveland. Verdugo Hills is 18-10 overall and 8-3 in league. Cleveland is 9-17 overall, 1-9 in league. But remember, they play in the West Valley League where they've got, they get beat up on, and they beat up on each other. So that is why they have such a ranking, regardless of that record. The fourth and final team with the bye is Lacey's. They're the number 3 seed. Playing for them is El Camino hosting Van Nuys. And this El Camino team, we've said it a couple times on the pod, they turned it around in the second half. A lot of credit to those girls. That coach who came on at the absolute last minute to make sure they could have a season. To me, that's an amazing storyline for them. They get a home game, and if they can win, they potentially set themselves up for maybe an upset and a deep run. I have a couple of notes and questions about these. I'm going to bring them up, and we'll just kind of go one by one after Kenny goes through his bracket breakdown. So we'll throw it over to Kenny.
In D1, we ended up with 6 teams from the Valley represented here. And there are a couple of teams for me that sort of stand out. Obviously, Poly has been a strong team in the city section all year. They've been a top 10 level caliber team in the city section. I think that 4 seed they ended up with is a little bit low for what they've done this year, being an undefeated league champion, having the schedule that they've faced and the teams that they scheduled to play this year. I think that they maybe were definitely worthy of a top 2 seed here in D1. But they've landed at 4. So, I mean, the road will be tough for them. It's, they're going to probably, and my guesstimation, they're going to probably see Garfield that first game out on the 9th. And then if you win that game, then you have to go on the road to the number 1 seed Hamilton, who, in my opinion, probably should have been open. But the work is cut out for Poly if they're going to win the championship this year. Are they capable of doing it? Sure, they are. But it won't be easy. And then on the lower tier of that bracket, when you have teams like Verdugo and Cleveland, these are battle-tested, battle-hardened teams. Cleveland in that West Valley, the sort of schedule they face all year. Verdugo's a team that schedule's tough. They've been a little bit of transition with some of the talent they lost coming in this year, but there was still plenty of championship pedigree there. So that should be a competitive matchup that first game out. And then when you look at El Camino, I mean, what they've proven to us this year is that there was still plenty of left in the tank from that championship team from the year before. Even though they got out to a slow start, they definitely turned it around and were able to host the playoff game their first the first game out in the playoffs. So I think this Division I bracket will ultimately be very, very competitive.
Eric, anything you want to add before I jump into these questions? You guys can both answer them when I throw them out.
Yes, Verdugo was up against Eagle their first time around just about a week ago. They were up 36-30 in the third quarter, but from that point on, Eagle Rock went on a 14-0 run. But can Verdugo get that revenge the second time around? This is going to be the question.
Yeah, you actually stole the thunder on that question. We'll get to that in a moment. So I'll start from the top of the bracket with the questions. With Arleta hosting Narbonne, there are no favors for the winner. That's how I see it. The winner of this is going into Hamilton And I'm sorry. I don't really have much more to say to that. That's hard. Pauly, as Kenny mentioned, a win will put them in a spot to rematch Hamilton. That was a really close game. I think it was a 9-point finish, and they were in it throughout. Now going into the bottom where we have some questions. Is this going to be a Verdugo Hills revenge tour where they prove naysayers, and I'm going to include us in there, wrong, and challenge for a 4th straight city title, which will be tremendous considering they went 4, 3, 2, and this would be 1 in divisions. That would be amazing. But this is a team that is a little banged up, transitioning, trying to figure out their identity. It's a team without a floor general to kind of run things and calm things down. Cleveland, is this statement time for them? And that's the question I'm asking Kenny. Is Cleveland going to be able to make a statement and go on a run?
Here's the thing. When you look at this matchup, right? So let's start with Verdugo Hills. Piggyback off of what you said. To win at 4, win at 3, win in 2, jump to 1. For me, there's a sizable jump when you start talking about separating those D2 teams from what you get in D1. Because the facts are facts, right? When you talk about the teams that are kind of locked in or slotted for D1 at the beginning of the year, 8 of those teams move in the open because of how dominant the top of D1 can be. So the work was cut out for them coming into this year. They lost some notable talent, but there is the foundation that has been built in that program. You can't count them out because this team, if there's any team in the postseason, regardless of division, that you can look at and say, hey, they've got battle scars from what they've done. We're talking about a team that still has plenty of talent that damn near made a run all the way to a state championship last season. They still got plenty pieces from that team last year. Has there been a bit of a transition? Have there been more young players who have been asked to do more, and it's kind of you've seen the up and down and the roller coaster that kind of comes with asking freshmen and sophomores to kind of step up and do things on a varsity level? Yeah, of course. But that team is going to give you their best shot on Tuesday. And when you talk about Cleveland, any team from the West Valley, just because of what you deal with in league play and how you have to build programs to go up against those monster charters, there's dangerous. They're dangerous. There's talent. Problem for Cleveland is they are limping into the playoffs a bit. Some of their key players are going to be a little hobbled and won't be able to contribute in the ways that staff would need them to. But the winner of this game whoever survives that matchup might be in a position to really kind of get rolling, especially when you're talking about an Eagle Rock team. It's the trick of the bye, right? Yes, you had a bye, but you're going to get a team that's coming in with momentum because they just played 2 days ago and they're kind of riding a wave of, we got through that. All right, let's lace them back up and let's go again. And you kind of have to deal with a ball that's already rolling downhill. I think either one of these teams are good enough or capable enough to beat Eagle Rock. It's just going to be a matter of who can survive that matchup between each other.
The last game that Eagle Rock had, they had a player that's a senior on senior night drop a triple-double against Franklin. So she's going to be hungry that second time around.
Yeah, I agree. And that's where you kind of, when you start to separate, or when you start to look at what teams have players that can really kind of light you up, right? Eagle Rock's has one in that young lady. Verdugo has Nicole Venegas, who she's had a bit of an up and down year, but she's a senior. She's a city section player of the year. We know what that girl can do. If she gets hot, she can carry them all the way to a D1 championship. She can put the team on her back. So, yeah, it's going to be players like that. That's another question when you look at that particular little triangle of the bracket. When you're talking about Verdugo and Cleveland and Eagle Rock, the team that ends up in the semifinals against whoever they face, that's going to be how they got there. One of those teams are going to have a player that kind of gets hot and kind of separates those teams. Because to me, when I look at those three teams talent-wise, they're pretty balanced. Like we talked about when Verdugo played Eagle Rock a couple of weeks ago, Verdugo had a lead on that team. So even though Eagle Rock is a 2 seed, they could have easily dropped that game at Verdugo. And we might be talking about Eagle Rock playing in a play-in and Verdugo maybe having sitting on a bye. So yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see which one of those teams has the player that can kind of really step up and kind of carry the program on their back, because you're going to need a dog to step forward in D1. You really are.
You are. And talking to dogs, I really feel like this El Camino team is full of them. Like, again, this team won D1 last year. They're the defending D1 champions. They have a chance to defend their title. They're in the play-in, 6 versus 11. And the question I have looking at this, though, is, are either of these teams contenders or are they pretenders? Because whatever they've had to overcome and what they've got to, looking on paper and what they've been through, you want to say El Camino is a contender. They're defending champion. But I personally still have some questions, even though I haven't seen most of these teams this season, which is why I'm mostly asking questions and moderating. So there's the question lies. Which of these teams are contenders and pretenders? El Camino and Van Nuys.
To me, Van Nuys, they are there's potential in that program. I don't think they're there yet. They're worthy of being a D1 team. If you had put this Van Nuys team in D2, for instance, they probably would make a strong run. I don't know if they'd beat the top 2 seeds there, but they'd make a strong run in D2. But I just don't. When I look at them compared to some of those other teams, I think they're properly slotted as an 11 seed in D2. So I would not expect them to go on the road and beat El Camino. I just don't think. I think that they're a player or two away from that program really getting running and really being a threat in Division 1. Elko, just because of the championship pedigree that still is there, that's still left over from last season, you just can't. I was watching them play the other day, and I saw some of the players, even just in warmups. The first thing I thought in my head was, I'm like, I feel like I'm back at Roybal watching this team warm up to get ready to play Taft in the D1 championship. Because I'm like, yes, there were some new faces, but there were plenty of familiar ones that I had seen, that I had grown familiar with, from the team that was really tough to beat and ultimately won the D1 championship. And you also got to think, with those players that are still there, there's a certain level of disrespect that they're going to feel being the defending Division 1 champion. And they feel like no one's thinking that they're going to make a run here. Being in that first set of games on Tuesday, being in those playing games, not getting a top 4 seed, which you got to believe a team that is a defending champion, even though they didn't have a great season in the West Valley, will feel like we should have been a top 4 seed just because of our pedigree and our history of what we've done. You know, the type of teams that we have to deal with on a week-to-week basis, which, oh, and by the way, stole a couple of games from teams in the West Valley and were competitive in ones that they didn't win. So they might probably feel like they're undefeated here and will come out and give a great effort against Van Nuys. So to me, Hamilton and Poly are 2 teams that I think are the best 2 teams there. But if El Camino went on the run, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Elko did have some pretty close losses to Eagle Rock and to Laces, so Laces by 10 and and Igorok by 3. So in a dogfight at Westchester. So
that's the thing. So when you look at a team that shows you that even though they lost to some of these teams, these open level teams, these top tier D1 teams, they're in these games. So if they've learned from mistakes they made, when you lose tough games, single digit losses, there are always things you can learn, you can improve. And the way Elko has played down the stretch tells me that they have learned a lot from the things that they've kind of been through this season, with the turnover, with the tumultuous nature of the start of the season, in terms of like losing a coach, having a new coach, having to incorporate new girls in. But this team has fought their hearts out all season long, and this might be the time they're ready to show the fruits of that labor. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Elko went on a run here.
I don't think anybody would. I mean, there's in D1, I would say there's easily 4 teams. If they went on a run, no one would be surprised. And obviously, top 2 of those being Pauley and Westchester. So we'll throw it into D2 now. This has 5 Valley teams in matchups. One with a bye at the number 2 seed. I'm not going to spend too much time going through every single matchup that's not Valley related, because there's a lot of meat on the bone as far as all the divisions. So we'll jump right in at the top of the bracket. Sylmar got ranked at 9, and they're traveling to Carson. Now Sylmar's 13-3, 9-3 overall. There's some questions there. Their strength of schedule. Who do they actually play? But being in D2 doesn't seem like they're out of place. But I do feel that they're not in a position to make a deep run where they're seated. And then moving down, North Hollywood is the 12th seed. They were 12-11, 6-5. Again, this team had a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde in them. They're visiting Bravo, who was the 5 seed. Number 2 seed with a bye is Chatsworth, and this Chatsworth girls team had a really strong preseason, pre-league play, got into league, and we know what happens in the West Valley. And the top team is going to beat up on everyone else. You learn that Chatsworth is growing, but they're not quite there. They're still young. And the play-in for them, Northridge Academy is the 15th ranked team hosting Marquez, who's 18. Northridge is 15-6 overall, 8-2 in league. I think this is the first time in many years that they did not win their league. I'll let Kenny expand on that. At least they get a home game in this instance. And then the final team we have in D2, Kennedy is the number 10 ranked, 10 seeded team. They're visiting Lincoln. They were 12-11 overall, 8-4 in the Valley Mission. So when I look at this, there's questions everywhere. And I'm gonna let Kenny expand on those and maybe give us a couple answers, because I don't know what I'm looking at in terms of who can go where. I see it, and I can't say with any confidence outside of Chatsworth that any of these teams might be poised to do something big. And maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so we'll start right there in that little top quadrant of this bracket with Sylmar. What's interesting about where Sylmar has landed here is they've definitely landed in a prove-it spot. For you to sit at 9 when you were 13-3, but let's be honest, they're 13-3, but the majority of that schedule was their league schedule out of the Valley Mission. They didn't schedule too many games outside of league play. And I think anyone who has kind of followed basketball this year knows that once you got past San Fernando and Sylmar in the Valley Mission and Van Nuys in the Valley Mission, there was a sort of a precipitous drop off in terms of the level of sort of competition. In terms of, if you are a great team, you were going to beat up on the bottom of that league, and you were going to build a bunch of wins based on the bottom half of that league. So there's no doubt in my mind that this is a quality team, but I don't know how good they are. But when you have to go travel to Carson first game out, and if you beat Carson, then you get to go 2 days later and go to San Pedro. Well, we're going to find out how good you are, like pretty much right away. They've put you in a position where you've got to go travel and prove some things that you maybe haven't had to prove during the regular season. We're going to see exactly what that 13-3 is. Was that 13-3 a byproduct of you putting 6 or 7 wins on the board against lesser teams, and now you're in the D2 playoffs, and we're going to expose you that you aren't as good as your record says you are? Or maybe just because maybe you're going to sneak up on some teams because you didn't schedule a bunch, people don't have a lot of tape on you, and you're going to go and you're going to pull some upsets. So we're going to find out with them. Another team that's intriguing is North Hollywood. They're going to go and travel to Bravo. This is a team that sort of perplexed me all season. They have a 6'3" player in Shadell Finch who has the potential to kind of be a game wrecker, but the consistency hasn't always been there. Now if this young lady kind of shows up and pulls out and gives you all the tools in her bag, can they beat Bravo? Of course. Can they make a little bit of a run? I don't know how far they can go, but they can be a team that sort of wrecks this bracket because they have a player who can be a game wrecker. But ultimately, this bracket to me all comes down to what Chatsworth does. This is a team that maybe they weren't ready to be D1 yet because of the teams they play in the West Valley. But if anybody who knows me knows I've been high on this team all year because the potential is there, not just for this year, but for the next couple of years, for this team to really kind of show you that they are continuing to climb and catch up with the rest of the pack in terms of those teams in the West Valley that we know are good in Grenada, in Birmingham, and Taft. This team is a step behind them, but they're coming. And this D2 playoff could be an opportunity for them to show that last year was just the beginning of what this program is going to be. They came very close. They were very competitive against Verdugo Hills in the D2 championship last year. And this year, to me, this is their bracket to lose. Yes, if they get to the championship or if they get to the semifinals, they'll have to deal with a tough Marshall team more than likely. Yes, if they beat them, they'll have to deal with a very, very tough San Pedro team. But their talent is there on this team. If they play well and they play consistent, they don't turn the ball over, which is the thing that has plagued them this year. Their youth has showed up at times. They turn the ball over against good teams, and that'll kill you. But if they play clean, this is a team that is more than capable of kind of ripping through this bracket because the talent is there. The young talent is there. And they've got established seniors who have made a deep run in the playoffs and knows what it takes. So to me, everything in this bracket, it kind of hinges, especially for us and who we're watching in the Valley, it all hinges on Chatsworth. But I will say for them, I think they'll be okay in their first game out. Their second game out, there is a real possibility they can have to match up against Kennedy. Kennedy has been a team that has kind of shown that they have grown and progressed as the season has gone along. That could be a trap game for them in this playoff if they were to look past the Kennedy or even Lincoln or Kennedy, whoever emerges from that game. Chatsworth has got to be ready to play 4 quarters of good basketball because that could be a game where they could look up and they can get beat. So, but Chatsworth is the team that I think is going to run through this bracket. I think they're going to win this Division II championship, and it's just time for them to kind of show their mettle.
Chatsworth had some pretty intriguing games earlier in the year against Wilson and against Kennedy. So Chatsworth needs to watch out for Kennedy, I think.
Okay, yeah. And that, I mean, this D2 bracket is not without landmines. So it definitely is one to tread carefully. As we roll into D3, I am going to say I will be revisiting all the brackets at the end, and I'm going to have Kenny give me his finals and his champion. Way too much to go through the entire bracket, but we're going to have his geniosity on display with the finals and the champions. So in D3, we have 4 matchups. Starting at top, Lakeview Charter was the 13th seed. They were 12-6 overall, 6-2. Vaughn knocked off Northridge Academy for the first time in a very, very long time. They went 16-5 overall, 9-1 in league. And right below the 7-10 seeds, Socius, Sherman Oaks, they were 10-8, 15-5 overall. They're the 7 seed. They're hosting Triumph Charter, 13-4 overall, 6-0 in their league. They took league. And then down in the play-in, Panorama came in as the 14 seed. They're hosting Animo Robinson. They were 9-13 overall and 4-8 in league. Couple thoughts before I throw this over to Kenny. Looking at Lakeview Charter, they got a home game. Something to get excited about. The question there, can they pull through and maybe pull a couple upsets? Is that possible?
I believe it is. I've seen this team play a few times this year. They're a small outfit. They're a small bunch. The depth is not there with some other teams that they would run into in the Valley. But in this bracket, they have a couple of young ladies who can light it up from the outside. If you aren't prepared to guard the perimeter, that's where they look to hurt you. They've beaten a few teams that are in this bracket, so they will come into this playoffs with some confidence, knowing they can play with some teams on this D3 level. And spoiler alert, I actually have them pulling a few upsets in this bracket. I actually have them getting to the semis. Because I just think that the way the bracket breaks down, I think that the matchups they will see, I think that the way they can shoot the ball when they get hot, I think that this is a team that can make a run that people aren't expecting. But if you'd watch them, you may have expected that this was something that this team could do. They could totally wreck the top half of this bracket. I don't know if I don't have them getting all the way to the championship, but this is a team that if you aren't prepared to play, they're going to come into your building, because after that first game, they will have to go to other teams' building in the next couple of rounds. But I actually think that this team is built to be able to do it. I think they're tough-nosed. I think they're tough-willed. I think they can shoot the ball well enough from the outside. They're kind of one of the sleeper teams to kind of make some noise here in this bracket. On the bottom half of the bracket, there are 2 teams to me that kind of stand out, 3 teams really, that I look at in terms of our Valley representation. And I say to myself, if things break right, these are teams that could kind of really kind of rattle the cages in this bracket. The first one is Panorama. Now, they are absolutely slotted as a 14 seed here, properly, just because of the difficulties and the ups and downs of this team this year. But what I'll say about Panorama, what I'll say about this team and this collective group of girls, when they play with confidence, they can play with just about most teams, especially on the D2, D3/D3 level. Would I go as far as saying they can play with D1 teams? No. They aren't there talent-wise, but the issue with them when you watch them is that these young ladies have to believe that they can play as well as they are capable of. When they believe that they can play well, when they believe and they trust each other, they play people tough. It's just that when they get down on the scoreboard, you start to see shoulders slump a bit, and then you start to see the level of play just kind of nosedive. These young ladies got to believe in themselves, because the time is now. It's one and done. You don't come now, you're going to go home and everything, all the work you put into is finished. But I do think that this team, especially in that first matchup, they are well talented and have the depth to beat Anemo Robinson that first game out. The question will be, can they go to Contreras then and kind of put an effort together that might sneak them through to the next round? That remains to be seen, but they're a team that definitely, if they can just kind of pull it together, can kind of make some noise. Another team that I'm looking at, that Sochis and Triumph matchup. Two teams that are kind of sort of well matched. Triumph is a team that's kind of gone under the radar because they play in a smaller league. They played well this year, but I don't know if that team has it to beat Sochis, but if they do, they could be trouble in the next round. But again, ultimately, this bracket, for especially in terms of the teams, our Valley representation, Vaughn is a team that sitting here in this D3 bracket. But again, if you've seen them play, you know that those guards and that backcourt is D2, D1 talent in that backcourt. Those girls can play with anybody. They are quick. They harass the passing lanes. They get steals. They can light it up from the outside. This is a team that is supremely, supremely talented in their backcourt. And then they added a girl in the front court who can rebound for them. And that was really all they really needed in the second half of the year. And that was how they ultimately ended up winning their league. I think Vaughn is the team to beat in this bracket. I know that their coach and that coaching staff is kind of worried about George Washington Prep and what they would bring to the table. But to me, this is Vaughn's bracket to lose here.
Enough said there. That's going to be an interesting one to watch. Can Vaughn make that run that they're kind of poised to make? You know, the number 2 seed, bottom half of the bracket, they really look like they might be able to make a run. Now going into D4. This has 5 matchups that we could be seeing. And they're all, when you get into this point, a lot of these teams, it's a bit of a crapshoot, a lot of the smaller divisions, but there's definitely the opportunity to make some noise. So we've got number 1 seed is the Valley Academy of Arts and Sciences Voss. So that's a great one for them. And the play-in for them, you have Sun Valley Magnet. Sun Valley went 7-10 overall and 5-3 in league. Number 4 seed with a bye is Community Charter out of Lakeview Terrace. They were 6-6 overall, 3-4 in league. And down in the bottom half of the bracket, you have East Valley, number 10 seed. They were 7-8 overall, 2-8 in league. And then in the play-in on the bottom, you have Chavez, who went 5-18 and 4-8 in East Valley League play. There's definitely some things that could happen. I'm going to turn it over to Kenny in a moment just to kind of break it down. But while we're here, I need to give the record for Voss, the number 1 seed. They went 11-7 overall, 6-4 in the Valley League. So they're as the 1 seed. You always say they're kind of set up to go on a run. But again, this is kind of one where if you make it, everyone's excited. Kenny.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more that this, when you get to D4, it's anybody's game here. A lot of these teams, there's a lot of parity when you get to this point in these division brackets. But I do think that a team like Chavez is intriguing here. As a 14 seed, yes, their record is not going to impress you, but they play in the East Valley. So when you just think about the idea that, yes, they were 4-8 in league, but they had to play Poly twice. They had to play Verdugo twice. they had to play North Hollywood twice and deal with that 6-3 monster in the middle for North Hollywood twice this year. They had to play a tough team like Arleta twice. So we're talking about a battle-tested, battle-hardened team. They came on the short end of the stick. But sometimes with a team like that, it's like a batter in the batter's box that had a donut on his back. You are punching up so much and so long during the course of a season that you get into this D4 bracket, and now all of a sudden these teams that you're seeing don't feel as tough as what you dealt with when you had to deal with the Leasing twins and Poly twice this year, and what Verdugo throws at you, and all of a sudden you're set up to sort of make a run. And when you look at the teams on that portion of the bracket, it's not out of the realm of possibility that this team could put a 2-3 game run together and find themselves in a semifinal or a final, just because the level of teams they're going to see here are not quite the same level of teams that they played in, especially the last month and a half of the season when they went in the East Valley. So that's an intriguing team to watch. And Voss is intriguing because they absolutely deserve to be the top seed here. They were part of a 3-team race at the top of that Valley League with Northridge Academy and Vaughn. They had the short end of the stick, but they also had a couple of girls that were sort of in and out of the lineup. When you talk to their coach, they believe that they could have easily won that league if everybody was healthy all at the same time. So they're going to see themselves here and as the 1 seed in D4, and they're going to fully expect to make a run. And I kind of expect them to kind of make a run here too. So, but it's going to be interesting to see. But those are 2 teams in D4 to watch. Chavez, the 14 seed, and Voss as the number 1 seed here.
You had to go Chavez.
I promise it's not a bit. It just worked out that way, that they were sitting there, and you just kind of look at how the bracket sort of breaks down, and I want to put some respect on their name, because when you look at a lot of the teams here in this bracket, not a lot of these teams sort of had to kind of battle with this against the sort of competition that this team has had to deal with the last month, just the last month of the season. They're going to actually get into this playoffs, and they're going to see Donnelly, and they're going to take a breath, because they're going to not see a pair of twins shooting the lights out in a blue and white and yellow uniform over there. And they're going to be like, okay, we had a shot today. So I'm just saying, they're a team. Don't be surprised if you look up on February 17th and they're sitting there playing Robert F. Kennedy or whoever, or Downtown Magnet in the semis. That's all I'm saying.
My hot take would be an East Valley Chavez semifinal. And East Valley had a very close one with Voss, the 2 league meetings in the Valley League. So I wouldn't see that as a possibility as well.
That is true. You can't sleep on East Valley. They were a team that played tough, and like I said, they had to deal with Northridge Academy and Vaughn 4 times this year. So they're a team that is kind of seen what it's going to take to kind of compete in the postseason. So
and East Valley has a monster in Vega, so doubles machine. So Valeria Vega is a 5'9" sophomore that's a really big threat.
And that takes us into D5. We're going to do a really quick look at D5, and then I'll have Eric and Kenny give their finals predictions and who they think is going to win. And I'm going to have you do it for all 5 divisions. All right. Up on the top of the bracket in the play-in, you have Lake Balboa College Prep visiting Roybal. They're the 17 seed visiting 16. Lake Balboa went 2-3, 2-13 overall, and 2-6 in their league. Bit of a rough season, but they were able to get that extra game. Hey, at the end of the day, you can say you made playoffs. And then in the bottom half, you've got Discovery as the 15 seed. They're hosting actually Cal's early college. They went 5-3 overall. They did not play any games outside of league. So that doesn't say too much about them and what they could do. But again, when you get into this area, all these schools, there's a lot of parity, like Kenny said. So we're going to be watching. And it wouldn't surprise me if any of these teams went on a run. And then on the bottom, number 6 seed, you have North Valley Military Institute. They went 6 overall, 3-5 in league. They're hosting University Pathways. And I mean, NVMI is one that I don't like to sleep on. You never know what they're going to bring. They've got the, training of being a military institute. So there's expected to be some discipline in what they're going to bring out of it. That would probably be the one I would want to keep an eye on in D5. But outside of that, I'm going to turn it over to Kenny and Eric if they got any notes on this.
The one thing I'll say is in this bracket, similar to what we talked about in D4, is it's wide open. I wouldn't be surprised if any number of teams, that there are 6 teams that come to the top of my head, from Fremont to Rancho Dominguez is a team that has kind of had to kind of go through the ringer this year. Gala is a team I could easily see making a run. So it's wide open to me. And just to piggyback on what you said, NVMI is a team that is, for the last couple of years, because they're a small outfit, they've had to take their lumps. But what I do appreciate about that program is they do schedule. They schedule those lumps. They go out and they'll play some teams and they'll get beat up a bit. But this is where the fruits of their labor could really show up, especially in D5, when it's essentially whoever wins this one is whichever team kind of gets hot enough to kind of carry the way offensively. So I wouldn't be surprised with any number of teams kind of taking the championship here.
All right. And on that note, we're going to throw it to the predictions. We'll start with open. And like I said, we'll have you name your finals matchup and your champion for the division. And we're going to hold you to it. So we'll start with Kenny, and then we'll throw it over to Eric, and we'll alternate with each division. So open will be Kenny, D1 will be Eric. We'll go like that. Yeah, let's go with open.
So this one was tough. Obviously, these are the teams. These teams have been the top of the top all year long, and realistically, without trying to hedge your bet, you could go 4 or 5 ways here, and no one would blink and say, "Oh no, that team couldn't win." So, where I ultimately landed in terms of the teams that I thought would end up in the championship is, it wasn't intentional, because I kind of went through this bracket and rewrote it and threw one out and started over and was like, well, maybe this team could do this. A team that I was worried about, a team that I thought could make a run, but I'm worried because they've kind of lost their point guard here, is Birmingham. So I kind of backtracked on them. And ultimately where I ended up in my championship game, I'm going to go 1 versus 2. I'm going Granada Hills, Westchester. And that one was tough. That one was tough to me because I could easily see Crenshaw there over Westchester. That game is a coin toss to me in terms of a semifinal. But I'm going to go Granada Hills versus Westchester in the championship. And I'm going to go Westchester. I think I could easily see this game coming down to a final possession. I could easily see this game coming down to someone hitting a jump shot to kind of win it, or a rebound and a putback kind of being the difference. But I think that's how close those two teams are. They've been 1-2 all year, and they've been 1-2 for a reason. I think they're going to play each other in the championship, and I just think Westchester will edge out Granada Hills. So I have Westchester as my open division champ. Who you got, Eric?
For open, I have Granada, And I also have Westchester, but Granada's just been dominant all year, so I have Granada in the end. Boco's just too dangerous.
I mean, like Kenny said, you can see 4 or 5 teams taking open. I do not disagree with either of those takes. If Birmingham had a healthy point guard, we might be having a different conversation. But we got to move on. In D1, we kind of went back and forth. We didn't really say who we think is going to be in the final. We threw out some semifinals. So, Kenny, who do you got? Sorry, Eric, who do you got?
I have Hamilton and Pauley. No, Hamilton and Eagle Rock in the finals. With Hamilton winning.
Yeah, so for my final, and this was tough for me. I think that Pauley and Hamilton is a competitive matchup. I think you're splitting hairs with who would win in that semifinal, but I think ultimately what hurts Pauley is their lack of size. I think that the difference between those two teams is that Hamilton can rebound better than Pauley does, because ultimately sometimes Pauley leans on the Leasing twins to kind of be on the boards a little bit more than they probably want them to be. And I think Hamilton's size is the separator. I think that was the difference in that 9-point matchup earlier this year, was just the idea that Hamilton is just a little too big. And again, Hamilton is on an absolute disrespect tour, because this is the team that feels that they should have been open, and they're out to prove it. And what better way to prove it than to go and win the D1 championship? That's the best way to prove that you got shafted from where you thought you should have been, by going out and winning that bracket. So I have Hamilton as my champion. I have them playing Laces in the championship, and I think they're going to beat Laces for the Division 1 championship.
All right, yeah, that couple different ways it could go, but I don't really have any arguments with Hamilton coming out of that one. So Kenny, I'm gonna have you kick off D2.
Yeah, so in D2, I really do feel like this bracket, there will be some upsets here or there, but I think ultimately where we end up is pretty chalk. My championship is number 1 San Pedro versus number 2 Chatsworth, and I think that this is the moment where Chatsworth kind of shows everybody that they've arrived, and they are ready to take the next step in the West Valley. And I have Chatsworth upsetting San Pedro in the championship and taking the Division 2 championship. So I have the Chatsworth Lady Chancellors as my Division 2 champion.
Edison Guerrero and Chatsworth will win Division 2 over San Pedro. My prediction.
Seems pretty unanimous there. I feel really good about this Chatsworth team from what I've seen this year. Again, not too much, but coming from the backgrounds we have, I believe Chatsworth can do it. So now we're starting to get into the divisions of parity. D3 is kind of where it's a bit of a separator. It's kind of that buffer division between the upper ones and the smaller ones. You've got some interesting matchups here. Eric?
In the end, I have Vaughn taking down George Washington to secure Coach Ortiz's, I believe, 2nd city championship, but his first since like 2016. So,
yeah, ultimately in this bracket, I have some landmines and some upsets along the way, but I think by the time we get to the end, when we get to the championship, it will be chalk. It will be 1 versus 2. It will be George Washington Prep versus Vaughn, and I also have Vaughn coming away with the Division 3 championship. That team has just been too strong, and I think they're going to show us that it wasn't fool's gold what we saw from them this year. They won their league championship. They ended Northridge Academy's reign, and they're going to go and take a city championship as well. So I have Vaughn as Division III champions.
And now we're going into Division 4. Like we said, there's some toss-ups. There's definitely some upsets. Kenny really likes Chavez. Surprise, surprise. And we're going to have him kick it off so we can see what his predictions are.
All right. So as much as I love to be a Chavez shill, I'm not going to be. I do have them making a little bit of a run, but I don't have them getting all the way to the championship. Like I said, once you get to Division 4, this thing is a crapshoot. So what I have ultimately in my Division 4 championship is I have Community, the number 4 seed, in the championship against the number 2 seed, Robert F. Kennedy. And I have Robert F. Kennedy coming away with the Division 4 championship.
In my honest opinion, I have it being Voss, the number 1 seed, and the Vipers taking on the number 10 seed, East Valley. They've had 2 previous close matchups. And in the end, I have the Vipers stinging the Falcons.
And that takes us to the final bracket of the night, D5. And we had 3 matchups with Valley teams, but again, this can go any which way. We tend to feel good about NVMI, but we'll have to see. Eric, what do you got?
I have Fremont taking on Camino Nuevo for the championship. And Fremont in the end. Yes, we haven't seen much of these 2 schools, but Fremont will win it.
Yeah, you're not going to get too much argument from me there. I do think because they are a little battle tested, I have NVMI making a run. I have Fremont taking on North Valley Military Institute in the championship, but I do have Fremont coming away with the championship.
There you have it. We've gone through the brackets, did the breakdown. You have the predictions. You have Kenny's geniosity on display. We're excited for the playoffs. We can't wait for it to actually come and start breaking it down. Tuesday night, everything gets rolling. Any final thoughts, guys?
The thought I'll leave you with is it has been a tremendous season, especially on the girl side. It has been competitive. We've seen some great matchups all the way down to the end of the season. That Birmingham Taft game the last week of the season was an incredible game to watch. And I'm excited just to see how things sort of kind of play themselves out. And because we have so many really competitive teams here in the Valley, right out of the gate on Tuesday, we have a bunch of matchups that are worthy of covering, and we will have our writers out there to see a lot of these games. But keep your eye on that Cleveland Verdugo game. That game could end up being one that we talk about at the end of the playoffs as being one of the best games throughout the entire playoffs. And a second one I'll throw in is Arleta and Narbonne. That one could be a barn burner too. That could come down to the last second. So I'm excited. I'm just excited to roll out the balls, and this is what everybody's worked for all year. So I'm excited to see how it all plays out.
Same here. Yeah, so I think that playoffs are going to be really fun. And a lot of Valley teams are going to win in the end.
All right. And with that, we're wrapping up. Thank you as always for watching. I will say go and pack those gyms. They tend to be full as it goes. These girls' games, man, they can get exciting. Get out there, support the teams, let them know you care, and we'll keep showing the love week in and week out. See you next week.
Peace.